Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. God, that made you jump, didn't it? Good afternoon. My name's Martin Chillcott, and I will be coming to you after these messages. The IDM's training course, and you can get 10% off selected. Special offer today. Get yourself over to A34, I'm told. So I think I've done my duty now to get that across. By the way, I do actually tutor the customer retention course for the IDM, which has been running now for about 7 years. And so if you're interested in hanging on to those customers you spent all that trouble getting, you might want to think about that and have a look on the site and see what you think. Anyway, I'm Martin Chillcott. I'm going to talk about magic bullet or old ammunition. And as long as I've been in marketing, there have been things which have come new to the sector, if you like, but perhaps nothing quite so much as this. I just thought I'd use this, a little graphic I picked off of Buddy Media, just to show us some of the things that we have to know about these days, and some of the things in terms of what it was possibly not only a white noise world for our potential customers, but also a white noise world for us. And here are some of the things that particularly affect that I've been interested in: Google, Facebook. There's a blog up there, Hotchilly Marketing. I operate as Hotchilly. I'm also an associate of Radar, and for my sins, I'm also a non-exec director of an NHS hospital with the biggest PFI problem in the UK. So this is quite a bit of light relief, actually, I have to say. And what we're going to talk about is how we navigate some of this area and what do we need to think about, and perhaps going back to some of the principles that we've known all along. Interestingly, you might notice Alexander down there. I have worked with Budget Insurance, which is the group that owns Compare the Market. I claim absolutely no credit whatsoever for that. I wish I could. And I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when the marketing director, who I know, went in and said, anyway, we're going to do some ads with some meerkats in them. I think he's probably the bravest man alive in marketing, I have to say, because I'm not sure I'd have been that brave. Anyway, but this comes back to something about 10 years ago. Anybody heard of an author called Alan Mitchell, marketing writer? And Alan wrote a book called Right Side Up, in which he talked about customers seeking to gain control through intermediaries. And he did a big speech at a thing like this, and all the CRM technology folk were there, and they all thought he was stark raving mad, because they reckoned that CRM was all about getting people to jump up and down on the ends of a bit of string using technology. And what Alan was saying is about intermediaries. And here we are, about 10 years later, and this has been going, comparison sites have been going for now 4 or 5 years, completely revolutionised the market in terms of insurance. Anyway, let's jump on a little bit. I thought I'd just go and give you a quick rundown of some of the other things which have been regarded as the next big thing in marketing, the magic bullet that, this is going to solve all of our problems. So there's a list going back to the early 20th century. Down the left-hand side. Oh, by the way, I thought I'd show you some old ads. The Oldsmobile, seeking to help people who are afraid of horses pulling their carriages, so they thought that would be a good idea, so they're appealing to something. This for Honeywell, the catalogue or guide, we still see those. Download your free guide about how you can magically make your customers buy more stuff. I'm sure we've all received plenty of that in our inboxes and when we visit anywhere. This, in terms of endorsement advertising, and this is a press example, I think this is quite interesting. That was one of the early ways in which we can get our message across to consumers. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. I have showed this to my NHS colleagues, and they were absolutely horrified and didn't realise they had some marketing huckster in their presence who is part of all this. And then finally, my great hero, Roger Daltrey of The Who, who, even though I was working for American Express at the time, we press-gagged into doing endorsement advertising. It was great for American Express card, but it hurt me so much that he'd actually fallen so far to do that at the time, although back up on top. But there you go. There's a whole raft of things which are looked upon as the next magic bullet. Interestingly, down here we've got something called database marketing, which sort of fell out of direct marketing, telemarketing, loyalty. And to a certain extent, I think we perhaps felt, well, database marketing, that sounds a bit dry, doesn't it? So why don't we put the word relationship in? That'll make it sound a bit more human. And people won't think that we all go around with pointy hats on with propellers on top talking about databases. But I'm just going to go through a little bit now. There's an absolute raft of magic bullets all the way down to near-field communication. We have the opportunity, or perhaps the threat, of becoming busy fools because we're getting so involved in so much. And it almost feels like a sort of collective ADHD in terms of the way in which we look at things. And, oh, look, a squirrel. So I thought we'd go back to basic principles. Now, anybody who's sat in the same room as Drayton Bird? Yeah, he's a friend of mine, but he can be a miserly old curmudgeon and very bad-tempered. He knows more about direct marketing than we'll ever know in this room. And this was Drayton back in '83. I'd recommend if you're going to read one book on direct marketing, read this one. In fact, his updated one. And he said, direct marketing is any activity which creates and profitably exploits. Sounds a little bit. Direct relationship between you and your prospect or customer as an individual, and some of the things that it typically features. So that's the first time I really saw relationship. And some of the marketing principles at the time when I was growing up in marketing, and as you can see, it was some years ago, but these still hold well today, which is a typical, if you looked at campaign elements of target audience, products, timing, offer and creative, and here on the left-hand side is the typical time and effort that as marketing folk, whether we're in agencies or in clients, we spend on it. And over here is the typical impact on results. Now, I've found this across many sectors and proven. So it's kind of interesting. We spend most of our time worrying, I don't know, I think it'd look better in purple. Whereas, in fact, what we should be focusing on is the potential target audience and the products which might actually solve some sort of problem for them, and understanding who they are and targeting them with something relevant. And as part of that also, something which I think people, even over the years, I think people pay a little bit of lip service to testing, because we can guess at what we think might work, might find attractive for particular customers, but we can actually test it in the end. I always remember doing pack research. That went out of fashion. You'd have a focus group and you'd have 2 packs, and you'd say, which one would you respond to? And customers would always choose the posh one. And the one that was a bit scraggy and had all the direct marketing stuff, no. And the one that always won was the non-posh one. The posh one was fun. So asking people what they're going to do is actually, why don't we test them and see what they do? Against the representative control, and also, if you're not quite sure, reverse test it. Now, there's lots of testing goes on in email, distribution tools, A-B splits. And everybody says, well, it's 50-50, so if we get a result, that must be okay. But if it's only 15 purchases, the chances are, statistically, if the new creative has generated 18, they're no different, because it's not statistically significant. So you need to have a look at that and understand that. Anyway, direct marketing, as I said, went from database marketing and then into CRM, customer relationship management. And at a conference much like this, about 8-9 years ago, I sat down with some people from a company who explained to me, said, oh, Marty, it's all really simple. And as they did that, they laid out this brochure, which actually, I've lost it because a cleaner took it from the last speech. It actually opens out into 4 panels. I think we can see where this sort of CRM thing came from in the first place. And I started to giggle a little bit because I thought it was quite funny, because it looked bloody complicated to me. And they got quite offended. But then I said, what's that there? And there's a little cartoon. You won't be able to see it here. But imagine somebody at the back has drawn this room with your heads all looking at the screen. They said, oh, no, Martin, see, that's where you explain all this to your colleagues back at the ranch. Now, I burst out laughing at that fate, and they got really upset. But it's all about the fact that it seemed to me that CRM technology in particular became an end in itself. And we forgot about the customer. I'm sure people who've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy know the significance of that number. The answer is 42. Unfortunately, nobody can remember what the question was. And CRM was a bit like that, really, which is, well, we've spent £500,000 on this. Now what? Well, we're going to mail some people. Yeah, but we could do that before. So it's all thinking about how we actually use technology. And the thing about why CRM was so attractive, and is attractive, I mean, there are aspects to it. Typically, a very straightforward way of looking at thinking about things from the customer's perspective and our perspective and how they come together. So we go out and acquire customers. We consolidate. I had a consolidation episode this morning. I've just got a new Samsung S3. See, I'm not quite as old as I look. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you in the instruction manual where the on-off button is. So I spent 15 minutes with an O2 guru, and he didn't know where it was either. So we found it in the end. But that consolidation period, when I'm starting to use the product, is incredibly important. Developing, retaining, and then winning back. Because there's only 3 things that you in the audience are responsible for today, which is finding the right customers and attracting them to you, keeping the right customers, and making sure they buy more. That's your job. I think that's what our job is. I was interested to note that in a session earlier, I stuck my head round the back, and it had just got to the Q&A bit, and it was a session about apps. And there was a guy standing right where I am now, and somebody in the audience said, does it result in any more sales? And I kid you not, he said, no, it's beyond sales. And I just thought, well, what is beyond sales? Because actually, if people don't buy stuff, our company doesn't prosper, we don't get paid, and therefore, again, it comes back to, do we run the risk, in some instances, of becoming busy fools? And actually, the problem with CRM is actually customers don't want a relationship. News just in. And that's from Sir Terry Leahy, ex-CEO of Tesco, who ran it is the most successful CRM program in the UK, bar none. And that's what Sir Terry says. And he says, actually, what they want is you to remember them, value them, treat your best customers well. Don't bombard them with loads of emails and please press menus on the call centre and all those things. So it feels like you value them. At the time, he probably said under his breath, and make sure you don't get any horse in the value burgers, but I mean, perhaps people weren't listening. Actually, if you see me galloping around at the front, I went to IKEA the other day and had the meatballs, and I had quite a large portion of these, so it's starting to have a bit of an effect. But this is the issue. Now, this part here and this part here, I'm just going to touch on a couple of really important things about this before I tell you about relationships. If I asked you, and I do this on the OEM customer retention course, I say, what's the 3 most important relationships in your life? And people never say, my bank, my insurance company, or my supermarket. By the way, people are very reticent because right now, some of you, I know quite a few of you, are thinking, if I was asked right now, I really wouldn't admit to the fact it is in fact my cat, because that's actually quite prevalent amongst people. But these are my relationships. I'm going to come to them. That's the Chelsea team that I love, not the current one, but the 1970 Cup final one. This is the place where I live. This is a little folk group. I play Irish drum in. I haven't got a drop of green blood in me, but I love it. That's where I get my hair cut, and you might think I need to go somewhere else, but I've had my hair cut there 15 years. My son goes there now, and so does my dad. I love music, as you can probably see from that. That's what's important to me. And this man in particular, who none of you will probably have ever heard of, but he's one of the most influential people on the effect on modern music today in terms of guitar bands. He's a guy called Wilko Johnson, and you'll see much more of him coming up soon. Anyway, those are my relationships. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I had a look at how, if we forget about relationship, there's this new word called engagement. Now, if I hear the word engagement in a meeting one more time and people can't define what it is, I am going to scream. In the NHS, I was invited to join an engagement committee. And I said, what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to be more engaging. With who? About what? Why do we want to do it? So engagement has become a very lazy, in my view, buzzword. And I can claim quite part responsibility for it, because about 10 years ago, I was having the argument about relationship at a big CRM conference, and I said, what about the word engagement? That might be interesting to think about. So sorry, folks, it was my fault. Hoist by my own petard. Anyway, I had a look at the Facebook pages of different things that... so Wilko, here. This is my local pub, the Royal Oak. This is Avis, who I did a bit of work with recently. And there's Whisper, and I quite like those. And what I did was I just went back and had a look at the last 3 posts. Did this just the other day. The last 3 posts, and counted up the number of likes, comments and shares. And what you can see is, in terms of engagement, 1 in 4 are engaged with the pub, 1 in 11 with Wilko, 1 in 250 with Avis, and 1 in 470 with Whisper. And I suspect if you do that yourselves and have a look and think about, there's probably somebody up there at Whisper headquarters, wherever it is, I think it's Cadbury's, and they're going, yes, we've got 1.9 million people following us on Facebook. They're very engaged. What, 1 in 500, really? Awful lot of effort goes into that. Now, some people get it really right. And I'll come to that in a moment. But this is just this is some work done by IBM, and it just looks at what consumers are interested in terms of social media and what marketeers think they are. And the key is we all agree on we want to follow for purchasing discounts, but the marketers feel that actually people want to be a part of a community, 61%, when in fact only 1 in 5 consumers actually think that. So there's a disjoint between what we think they want and what they do want. There are some who get it right. This is marvellous. This is Guinness. You won't be able to read it from back there, but all I'll say is I was following Guinness, and they said something about being a beer. Now, you think I'd know this stuff. And I said, beer? I thought you were stout. And within minutes, back came a reply, I managed to be both, Martin. To which I then said, well, indeed. So that was an interesting point of, perhaps makes me feel a little bit warmer about Guinness. But, you know, I'd be interested to know how you resource that and make that into sales. There are 3 types of bonds with customers we need to think about. I could go on all day about this, but I'll focus on the emotional bond. Financial, points being prizes. Structural, tied in with the contract. Maybe insurance companies are really finding that much more difficult these days in terms of people being locked into a regular payment or an automatic renewal. And an emotional bond, which here says something about understands me, recognises me, says something about me. But actually, emotional drivers, if you like, emotional bonds, there are 40. They're in little handouts. So this was put together by a guy called Victor Schwab. He's not exactly new technology. He came up with this. He was a catalogue marketing guy. And he came up in this in the year that I was born, 1956. And what it was is focusing on that people want to do. Things change, people don't. People want to do 4 main things. They want to gain something, save something, want to be something, and they want to do something. And there are the sorts of things. And use this as a checklist for thinking about your product or offer and about what are you trying to help them do in that emotional connection. And I'll give you an example of one that helped me stop worrying, wasn't very embarrassed, reduced my embarrassment, saved me a bit of work, and actually eradicated some doubts. I am the least practical man that you know. I can guarantee that. And therefore, faced with my wife Liz telling me, we really need to change the windscreen wipers on the car, I actually felt I just kept putting it off until I spotted this. Halfords, helping the practically challenged. And this was all about, I just couldn't do it. I just thought, what's going to happen? I'll go in there and buy them, and then I'll be in the car park for an hour, won't be able to fix them on, and then somebody will come out and laugh at me, and I'm useless at that sort of stuff. And then I happened upon this, and you actually go through a cycle. They've understood the customer. They've invested in the right technology, but they have actually understood the customer. So I select, I don't know which windscreen wipers to put on my car. Put your reg plate in, they tell you. Then they say, here's the nearest store. And then the magic bit was, would you like us to fit them for you for £2.50? Fantastic. What was even better is that when I did turn up, and the 2 guys who came out to fit them in their overalls came out and said, oh, look at this bloke, not even a real man, can't even put windscreen wipers on a car. It took them 20 minutes whilst I stood there and watched them, which was great. So it had a really sort of Schadenfreude thing as well going for it. So that was excellent. But it's the principle about, you could look at these for travel. Expedia have been brilliant at this for about the last 10 years. Really thinking through, the bits of the customer journey. Little bit there, Kotler. I'm sure if you've studied marketing, you should have read Kotler. If you haven't, go and read it. It is the Bible in terms of marketing management. And actually, we have to remember that our customers are not our customers. You'll have a small number who are very loyal, and the rest are actually going to be a part of another portfolio. The reason why I wanted to talk to you about consolidation, that period when we just bought, lots of people, this is the ladder of loyalty, and lots of people think that actually people go gradually up this ladder from being a suspect, prospect, all the way up to an advocate. But actually one of the best times to help customers is at this bit here, for something called cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is effectively, have I made the right decision? I think I have. So I think that phone I got, or that car I bought, or that new contract, because I've switched supplier, that was good. So hands up, who hasn't been bored by somebody in the office on a Monday morning saying, have you seen my new phone? I've just switched to Vodafone. What plan are you. So they're actually, and what they're doing is, you think, they're being a bit of a show-off, actually. Tell me about this. But actually what they're doing a bit of that. What they're really doing is they're seeking reassurance. They're playing out the reasons why they made the purchase, and they're looking at you to see whether you go, oh, brilliant, or you muppet, because they're looking for reassurance. A friend of mine was a publisher with EMAP. They used to sell more car magazines to men after they bought the car than when they were researching it. Because what they're actually looking for is reassurance. There's a road test here that says I made a really good decision. Or this actually says I should have perhaps gone for an alternative. Oh, they're crap. I'll buy another magazine. So actually, people are looking for reassurance. So think about when somebody's just bought, that's critical time, because that's when, if you can help them effectively reinforce and reaffirm the reasons, the good reasons why they've chosen you, they're more likely to repeat them to somebody else. They become an instant advocate. So that was a little bit about that consolidation phase. And just to talk a little bit about retention, don't worry about that. That was just there to show you that this is a piece of work I did for Vision Express a few years ago, and we had a whole messaging and very tightly thought through communication strategy, depending on people's age and life stage and what sort of requirements they had. Actually, we got all the benefit out of changing the way which we communicate in terms of timing. I would add, go out to retail locations of your brands and listen to the people who serve customers. This chap in Sheffield said, I won't tell you the exact language he used about the head office staff, but it was fairly colourful, that they wouldn't listen to him, that when he phoned, anybody got glasses and contact lenses? You get a little reminder saying go back in for an eye test. He said he did a straw poll of everybody who didn't come back in as a result of that mailing, and 20% had already gone somewhere else. So all we recommended was, instead of at 24 months the mailing went out, we sent it out 3 months earlier, and we increased retention by up to 20%. Before we even did all the creative stuff about targeted messages and relevance and building rapport and all that nonsense. So it was actually about thinking about timing. And then the other thing we did was we had a really fast follow-up. Their existing follow-up, a message going, who's got that pile of stuff at home, by the way? Yeah? Where's that thing we got there? Oh, it's on the side. Which side? You know, all that going on. The reminder reminds you that something good is in that pile of stuff and you should go back and get it out. So it's a way, a very simple, this was a postcard, but you can use email as well to just remind people they were thinking about doing something. And this is instant response. This is a chap I know called Richard. He runs a driving school. Started off, he got out of the rat race and became a driving instructor. I said, what's your problem, Richard? He said, I only managed to convert 1 in 3 inquiries, because when I get home at night at 9 o'clock to do my emails, so he looked at me and he said, I should get a BlackBerry, shouldn't I? I said, yes. He now looks at his BlackBerry at the end of each lesson, and his conversion is now 100%. Easy. That's all he did. He now does a nice little Facebook page with pictures of the people who've passed, because he's got a fantastic pass rate, and an endorsement saying what a smashing bloke he is. And he's a nice chap as well. His name is Richard Anker. He always says, I'm glad my mum and dad didn't call me William, but there you go. And the reason why we want to do all this is because of lifetime value, because it costs money to get new customers in. So we've got to actually try and sell them some more stuff. Now, anybody recognise the gentleman, and I'm referring to this chap here, in these photographs? Anybody want to shout out who you think any of them might be? Well, for quickness, I'll tell you this is not Lee Harvey Oswald, which is what people normally say. And it's a bit worrying because he's the absolute spit image of my maternal granddad, who I love dearly. Used to take me around his little car when I was a little lad. No, this is Vilfredo Pareto on the left, Italian economist from the 1850s. Pareto, you might recognise that name. This is Joseph M. Duran, a management consultant in the 1940s and 50s who popularised the Pareto principle, 80-20. And this is Slick Willie Sutton, notorious American bank robber. You can see that he's in handcuffs. And when the judge asked him before sentencing, after they finally caught him, and the judge said, Mr. Sutton, could I ask you, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. And there you go. And working through this is a piece of work I did when I went from being the junk mail manager at Thomas Cook, which is what everybody called me, to the head of direct marketing and customer insight, by demonstrating that actually nearly half of all of our revenue came from just 7% of customers. And we were treating everybody the same. Here it is again in Paul Smith. work I did in the last couple of years. This is their online customers. You can see down here, actually, nearly 20% of their sales online come from 0.5% of their customers. 1 in 200. Now, initially, they were very sceptical and said, well, that'll be Paul's friends. And we said, well, they get all the stuff sort of free? Oh, yeah. So there's a group of people down here they didn't know about. Very, very valuable. And as you can see here, the rule, which is you've got around about 10% generating about 45%. I don't wear any Paul Smith because, as you can see, I can't get into the suits. They're cut in a particular way, although I do wear the socks as a sort of brand statement. Right, that's Paul Smith. And here we are again. This is Vision Express, same thing again. This is percentage of customers. This is the value. And here's the same. This is for Streetcar. Somebody's waving at me, I don't know why, with 5 fingers up, but there we go. So I better crack on. So generating customer insight. So you've got to think about the value of customers. Right, hands up. Who has listened to customers live in the last year? Okay. 6 months. 3. 1. Last week. Oh. I have, because I do it all the time. You've got to be able to listen to customers, because otherwise you're not going to be able to understand. And a contact centre, a call centre, is one of the best ways to do it, or in retail. A few things I'm going to talk about very, very quickly. Customer journey. If you're in travel anywhere, this is how actually we think about buying travel. We wish we were on holiday, we want to go, we explore, we filter down, we buy, we then prepare and anticipate. Looking forward to... I'm going on holiday in 2 weeks. Fantastic. And you're not. Mind you, now it's added by the fact that people now send you photos, don't you? Hello, loser, you're in the office and I'm here. But that's the way you go through it. And you have to focus it. We focused a service at Thomas Cook back in the mid-90s based around that. So if you're in travel, Expedia use exactly the same thing, and I've used it again more recently with Page & More in 2009. It's very, very similar in terms of the way you need to think about whether it's online, offline. Very quickly, just bring in, if you don't know about your customers and you don't think your board know about them, bring them into your head office. We did this at M&G back in the late 90s because the board thought that the M&G, savings and investments, they thought the best customers were chaps like us, important chaps in the city. And when we brought them in, we found out they were the thrifty wealthy. We brought them to a seminar. And I'll never forget standing there as we welcomed them in, and the chief executive leant to me and went, Martin, who are these people? So there's a guy in a foam back jacket, Sainsbury's carrier bag, and those grey bendy shoes, with over 200,000 quid invested with M&G. Now, was Pareto right twice? I'll leave this to look at you. All I'll say is, yes, those other graphs showed it starting from 0. Actually, there's some customers who will actually lose you money. Building societies have a big problem with this. People who haven't got any money but like going in the branch every week to check their balance. So, but that doesn't mean you have to be horrible to them. So you have to make sure that if you understand the value, what is the service I'm going to give, because I can't afford to give personal service to people who don't make any money for me. Now, I'm going to finish quickly. Just the whole thing at the beginning of this was magic bullets and old ammo. Now, years ago, people would say, and I was partly responsible for it because I advised MBNA. By the way, 0% is my fault. So I'm sorry about the economic downturn, but I did play a small part in it because I thought that would be a good idea. This is Advantage Travel. And they wanted to know, came to me about 18 months ago and said, we want to know whether direct marketing works. I think by which they meant direct mail, because that's old hat, isn't it? Everybody does email now. So what we did was we just understood the value of the base, which customers. They're an independent consortia. They've got hundreds and hundreds of members. They all gave their data. We pulled it all together, and we looked at the valuable customers. We also looked at, do you remember that customer journey? When do people buy, but when do people go? Some people plan a long time ahead. Some people a reasonable time. Some people towards the end. And some people, have you got anything going on Sunday? And by the way, people don't change because that tends... I'm a last-minute Charlie in all respects. I'm probably 10 minutes late for everything, including finishing this seminar, which will be horrible. But we're all like that. So recognise it. If you've got data which enables you to see when somebody ordered something and when they used it most heavily, then you know what the consideration period is. And that's what we did. In travel, by the way, it's called, there's a gentleman down here from travel, so you'll know, it's called earlies, peaks, lates, and last minute. And then these are the results. Using a control group. This is using direct mail. And on the first phase that we did, the return on investment, so it's incremental profit, was 8.2. Spend £1, make £8.20. And then the second lot was 9.9. It was actually 10, but we thought they'd never believe us. And then the third one came in at nearly 14 to 1. All about understanding customers, where they are in the cycle, what value they bring to the company, the brand, or they can deliver, and then targeting them appropriately with what is a very expensive medium. Now, I'm not saying chuck everything away and just go back to direct mail. By the way, because lots of people aren't doing it anymore, the letterbox isn't so stuffed, so if something does arrive, you've got more clear water. But just think about the way in which you target, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You will have some stuff. And this works very, very well now. We've introduced email setup, and mailings coming soon. Oh, I'm going to look for my letterbox, and emails to actually follow up. And that has increased around about 30 to 40% of the response, which is typically what a follow-up will do. We also did a bit of profiling, so we could take all these customers, not just know they were valuable. This is what I do with a data practice called Radar. So we use CSCI and said, right, and here's what they look like. Here's what your best customers look like. And most of the travel agents can look at it and go, you're right, they do look like that. Those are the people who keep coming back in. So now I know who I need to appeal to. Job one, attract the right customers. How do I get that? Come and talk to me. We've got a license with CACI Ocean, so we actually take the customer data, apply it against a national geodemographic and lifestyle survey, and then come back and say, that's what your customers look like. And guess what? Pareto struck again with advantage. Do you remember I said earlier that Thomas Cook, 1995, 7% of customers generated 40% of the revenue? We found with advantage, travel, in the same sector, leisure travel, 7% of the customers drove 42% of the revenue. So in other words, this is not just, I haven't just picked out some examples that sort of prove that it happens with every customer that we go and see, the 80-20 rule. And it's really important for you to think about, because then you can concentrate your efforts. Final bit about money and value. I'm looking amongst you, and I don't want to be too nasty, but, go where the money is. Unfortunately, it's old gits like me. The 50-plus group have got 80% of the wealth in this country, and if they're employed, they spend 20% more than anybody under the age of 40. So it's where the money is, Slick Willie Sutton. And if you're going to do that, you might want to think, well, how the hell do I understand who these people are? Well, this is 55 to 64 age group. So understand where I'm coming from. So this was my life and formed my influences: music, motorbike, football. What have we got? Yeah, well, that's about it, really. I'm fairly shallow like that. Yeah. I mean, I'd do a little quiz and say, does anybody know who that man there is? Jill knows at the back. James Hunt, that's right. World Motor Racing Champion, 76. And this chap here? Barry Sheen. The rest of you going, who the hell's he? He was huge in terms of profile in the mid-70s. He was my hero. Hence why I ended up with this RD350. And they're the greatest punk band of all time. Influenced by the wonderful Wilco Johnson, we come around full circle. So this is me. And if you're thinking, I'm not sure I understand this older group and how to appeal to them, just think of your mum and dad, or an uncle, or if it's Stanner Stairlifts, your nan. Think about, how would I market to them? Well, I've done this with a call centre full of 20-year-olds, and they didn't know how to talk. They were saying, somebody would phone up, 70, 80 years old, Page and My Tour group. Hello, I'd like to talk about a holiday. Oh, hello, mate. You could just hear it on the phone, which is, who the bloody hell are you mating? I'm not your mate. So we just went through and we did little quality groups with them and just said, think about, when you're talking to somebody who's old, think about somebody that age who, not just that you love. Because that person, you'll really be able to understand how you can go towards thinking about looking after them. By the way, this, in case you're wondering what this is, some of the younger folk, they used to stand at football grounds. What on earth were they thinking of? This is the infamous shed at Chelsea. So, and interestingly, about 50% of all season ticket holders at Chelsea are people who first started supporting Chelsea by standing in the shed. Which is why it's not the Johnny-come-latelys, they can, but that's the shed. That's what we were. And finally, I'll just leave with that. It's got it in there, and because I talk about retention a lot, is we can go out and get lots of new customers, but think about retaining. The old adage, retaining a customer is 5 times cheaper than acquiring a new one. So before you rush off with the next magic bullet that's suddenly going to solve everything, achieve your quarterly target, and hopefully get you promoted, think about these 10 things about what you want to go through. Simple, straightforward, pragmatic, and practical. They're the sorts of things which somebody always said to me, Martin, when you're consulting, and I've been doing that for 10 years, having had a successful career on the client side, said, what's your number one objective when you're dealing with a client? And I said, to get them promoted. Because that means we're doing good stuff. It's probably because I like them, because I don't like working with people I don't like. And also it's good for me, because they've then got bigger budgets. But that's the cynical side of it. But that is it. You know, we have to make sure we're successful. I am not somebody standing here when you ask me, will this generate more sales? Will it generate more success and revenue? I don't say to you, oh, no. It's beyond all that. It's about actually generating real results. And keeping it simple some stage. I've just noticed recently, if you notice, Shell have done, this is something that used to happen for you younger folk. People used to, when you pulled in a petrol station, you wound your window down and a bloke came out and filled it up for you. Often with a fag on as well, which was always a bit worrying. I saw this in a petrol station in Corby, which if you've ever been there is one of the roughest places outside of the central belt of Scotland, mainly because that's where the iron steelworks were, but great people. And I went to this petrol station, and there were these two very aggressive-looking attendants covered in tattoos, and that was just the women. And then they pointed. I said, can I take a photograph of this? Blue badge holders, between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., Tuesdays and Thursdays, please sound your horn 3 times for assistance. And I saw this 4 or 5 years ago, and I said, do you get much business out of that? He said, oh, yeah, loads. We put extra people on, because people are there going beep, beep, beep. And that's the place that people go to buy petrol in Corby, because they thought about the customer. Shell must have spotted this, and they do it. However, of course, their corporate ID police said, the blue badge, oh, no, it doesn't really go with red and yellow. So it's actually in a sort of lowercase type that you can hardly read. Now, what's the one sign that a blue badge holder will recognise is for them? A blue badge. And they haven't done it. That is just what we call in the trade corporate bollocks. And finally, talking about understanding, listening to customers, I would encourage you, and thank God he's gone, which is to listen really carefully and know where you're going in terms of the strategy that you're going to employ to generate more success. Thank you very much.